All right. I am live. It's 6 o'clock. And this is kind of, what do I want to call this? I don't even know. Anatomy Corner. I just made that up. With your professor, Dr. Sean Clavel. And we are recapping some of the week's activities as well as kind of giving you some new materials. So I got some new lectures I want to, at least some cuts I want to put in to the canvas here this evening. So I'm gonna do that as well. Let's see where I'm at here, just kind of. But what I will do here this evening to start off is some housekeeping items as it relates to primarily my online class. So we'll start with some housekeeping items with my online class, and I'll grab up my Canvas here. If you just bear with me a moment, I'll open up Canvas. But we are in, maybe I can even do this right quick, right? We are in week 5. So here we are. Oh, I don't know how I did that. We are in week 5. I'll just zoom in a little bit. Where we're in the it's actually Valentine's Day. It's a long day, but I forgot. Not that I forgot, but I celebrated a little bit earlier, right? Uh, the 14th falls right here in week 5. We're going over histology. I've got that module up, and as I said, I might record a couple of cuts of some new material here this evening as well for my uh, lab assignment students for my in-person class. They got the lab assignment histology, and I published it onto my in-person class, and so those students will have that as an extra credit assignment, even though they do have their own lab assignment as well that's based on histology. So again, there is this chapter for histology. That's what we're going over here this week, and a little bit over next week as well. So as you can see, the integumentary system is going to be the next chapter, chapter 5. We'll go over that next week and a little bit in the week following. So again, histology might bleed over into week 6 as well, but ultimately we're going to come down to chapters 4 and 5 on one test, the tissue level of organization. So being able to identify the different types of tissues, and that's why I think that that assignment that I gave you is going to be important for both my online and in-person classes. But before I kind of jump out of the schedule here, you'll see that again, we're going through chapters 4 and 5 over the next 3 weeks, right? So 1, 2, and 3 here. We'll wrap it up at the end of the week with the end of the third week with an assessment over the tissue level of organization and the integumentary system. And then my in-person class is working on a histology lab as well as my online class. So that with that mentioned, I did want to mention something as it relates to my online class, and that was the creation of an assignment you saw earlier in the week. That had it kind of had a little bit of urgency to it, but it was a pre-lab for my in-person class. So it had a date of Tuesday because the class was anticipated to be on Tuesday. So I wanted my students to be able to finish it prior to. But here it is. It's called an extra credit now for my students of the online variety. Put it underneath laboratory assignments. But what you want to see here, the main reason I gave this as a pre-lab is to really review the main topics uh, of histology chapter. So you can see here that it was a lab assignment for my in-person class. But if you just take a look at the lab, give it a sec. If we just take a look at the lab workbook, you'll see a couple of things that I want to note so that it'll help you study in the preparation for the uh, exam a couple weeks from now, right? So if you click on here, this is the workbook. That's really where not I want to say the answers, but it's a your opportunity to write in the answers before you go into the quiz. But you can see here, like, what are the 4 main types of tissues? I'm going to talk about this. If you don't know what it is, I'm going to talk about this here or at least go into the lecture part. Name the three basic shapes of epithelial cells. Epithelial cells can be divided into two basic groups. So, really, really good questions, basic questions, introductory questions as it relates to histology, chapter 4. But also being able to identify these different types of tissues. So, you can either, I'm going to zoom in just a little bit if I can. You can either use the QR code or the hyperlink that's provided to you on the right side of the assignment or the right side of the worksheet here. So if I were to click on this, what it would give me, it would send me to a link that is there it is. That is and you can see here the simple squamous epithelium. So this is a picture that I got from Digital Histology. It's an open educational resource, so I can use it. And I do use it as a question for your exam, right? Like this is a part of the practical, being able to identify these different types of tissue. So this is what a simple squamous epithelium looks like. You can also see that this is, well, that's a simple squamous epithelium as well, kind of a large in nuclei, but this is simple cuboidal epithelium. So again, if you go back to your assignment here, we'll come back to the next one here, and this major type of tissue. So what would be the major type of tissue? I would call that epithelium. You know what? Let me get a little writing utensil here while I'm at it. Okay. And as it comes up, I'll use it. But the main type, the major type of tissue is one of those four types of tissues: epithelium, connective tissue, nervous tissue, or muscle tissue. And so underneath the major type of tissue, you would put epithelium and then the specific type. So let's see what specific type of epithelium this is. Here's the image that popped, or the link that popped up. This is simple cuboidal epithelium. You can see that this is simple cuboidal epithelium. You can also identify here that the simple squamous epithelium is present in this slide as well. So you should be able to identify those structures here in the lab, or the pre-lab, that is. So again, this is a way to use this as a learning or teaching tool. You guys can I try and identify it and then use the website there to test your knowledge. Try one more, make sure the link works as well. I'm gonna scroll. Yeah, let's go to the third one here, right? So again, major type of tissue. Again, it's the same type of tissue that we've been seeing. Epithelium. This is referred to as simple columnar epithelium. And so when I click on that link there, you can see that there's the name is right there on the screen as well. And so that name there, simple columnar epithelium, is the reference right there, right? So there's that name of the epithelium itself. It is simple columnar epithelium. And so this is what you would put for the correct answer in the practical. So what we'll see is in these next tests, the assessments will be split into multiple choice questions as well as the practical questions. And so you have, it'll be a two-part exam. You'll see that there will be primarily pictures related to the practical. So as you see here, you'll get a picture very similar to what you see on the screen. And from there, you would identify this as simple. This would also, I could also accept pseudo stratified, but primarily it is going to be identified as simple columnar epithelium. And so that is uh, what we called like this lab assignment number 4A, the pre-lab assignment for my in-person class, the extra credit kind of a really good worksheet for my online class. And so that was kind of what I wanted to introduce to those students there as well. But in wrapping up my announcements, really, I just want to go over the module. So if I zoom up here just a little bit, give the student view, maybe have to zoom out just a little bit just to give it a little bit of a more aesthetic view here. There we go. And so chapters 4 and 5, we have chapter 4 here, introduction, reading and outline and lecture of histology. There is, of course, the crash course. There's a couple of chapters of the crash course because it probably, I think it is consistent with, yep, epithelial tissue, connective tissue, and then the other types of connective tissue. What I don't see here is the nervous tissue and muscle tissue, but I'm sure that it is at least addressed in the first chapter. I do know it's addressed in the first one. And then again, here are the lecture slides and lecture material posted there at the bottom of the screen. Tissues and histology is the online lab for my students that are taking that, and they'll be completing that. And then I usually drop some additional videos as it relates to anatomy and physiology of the section there. All right, let me take a little bit of time here to uh, put up a little lecture material over the next 10 or 20 minutes or so that I can add it to my repertoire for my online material here. And so let me just jump right into it here as if I find my slides. All right. Welcome here. Oh, I didn't even start recording. Let me close this. Actually, that's a good slide there, too, huh? I won't jump in too much into that. Let me just make sure it looks okay. And then I got to hit record, and get right into it. Yeah, this looks good. 3, 2. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Anatomy and Physiology here at Arizona Western College. Today, we're talking about histology, the study of tissues. That's chapter 4 of our textbook. And so, the studying of tissues can usually be accomplished using a light microscope. Actually, studying the parts of a cell often requires kind of an electron microscope. And even the studying of atoms and molecules can only be examined through special imaging tools and experimental procedures. But if you look on the left side of our screen, you'll see kind of remember our organizational levels from the chemical level to the cellular level. And now we find ourselves at the tissue level, a community of similar cells that form a body tissue. A collection of cells with a similar function is going to be the key here. And so, what you'll see as we start to look at tissue is that they have very common functions, right? Their form is very similar, but their functions are also very similar as well. And of all of the hundreds of different types of cells, the trillions of different cells specifically, the body really all of the cells of the body really fall into one of four main categories, four types of tissues in the human body. I'll bring down my toolbar here so that you can see what we're talking about. But there are four main types. There's the epithelial tissue, there's connective tissue, there's muscle tissue, and nervous tissue. And so we'll examine all of these into uh, a little bit more depth, but we'll start by talking a little bit about each of them, including epithelial tissue. Now, epithelial tissue, often referred to as epithelium, refers to like the sheets of cells that cover your external surfaces or also may line the internal cavities and passageways of our body. Epithelial cells also form certain glands of the body. So, as we mentioned, this epithelial tissue will line the inside and the outside of the body. And so what you'll see here, primarily when you're looking at a slide with epithelial tissue, you can see that there's going to be a opening. There's a white surface here. That's the kind of often referred to as the lumen, right? The opening, if it's like a straw. But I'm going to say lumen here. Then on the opposite side here, you'll also see kind of a connective tissue attachment to it. So there's two portions. There's the bottom portion, what you may call, that's connected to connective tissue. Maybe you call it the deeper portion. And then the more superficial region, which is usually adjacent to like a blank white space that's a natural opening or a cavity that we see in the body. At the bottom of the screen here, what you see is skin. So at the bottom of the screen, what we have is stratified squamous epithelium, keratinized, and the structures here. Again, here's your big opening that you'll see. I'll kind of demarcate that here with the red marker. There, everything above this is all open space, right? That's the environment. And then as you go deep into the skin, what you'll ultimately find is connective tissue down here at the bottom. They'll even draw no error there. So kind of unique, some of the uniqueness of epithelial tissue. It lines the inside and outside of my body. So like connective tissue will never be exposed to the outside world. The next group of tissues, the next of the big four connective group of tissues is connective tissue. And as the name implies, connective tissue are the cells that bind organs of the body together, and they function to protect, support, and provide integration of all the body parts. And so, connective tissue is really the category of tissues, the collection of cells here that falls into the broadest of categories. So, you can see on your screen that connective tissue falls under fluid connective tissue, which includes blood and lymph, all the way down to dense connective tissue, but maybe even a little bit denser might be bone or cartilage. So, bone has inorganic salts. So, there are calcium phosphate salts in there. There is some organic parts, but primarily bone is inorganic, and that kind of accounts for its rigidity and its stiffness. Whereas blood, on the other hand, is 65% water. So, a structure that is primarily water, where you have cells suspended in an aqueous solution, is different than that of bone. But they all derive, essentially, they all come from the same embryonic stem cells. And that's kind of why they are falling in the same category here. Just to kind of put a hat on the last of this slide, dense connective tissue includes things that like our tendons and our ligaments. Loose connective tissue includes structures like adipose or fat. Muscle tissue is excitable, which means that it can respond to a stimulus and ultimately contract to provide movement. That term is also excitable or irritable are synonymous terms, meaning that you can stimulate a muscle. Like if you shock it, it will jump. And there's three major categories of muscle tissue. What you have on the top of the screen, on the top right hand side of the screen, is skeletal muscle. Skeletal muscle is the muscles that we're most familiar with, like your biceps, your triceps, your quadriceps, the muscles that are responsible for movement. They run in big, long, parallel bundles. The smooth muscle tissue is the type of tissue that's responsible for my involuntary movements of like my digestive tract. The muscles that cause my hair to stand on end are my smooth muscle tissues. And cardiac muscle tissues are unique because they don't require me to think to contract, right? I don't have to think for my heart to contract, but it also does have a arrangement of proteins that looks very similar to skeletal muscle. So the three types of muscle tissue include skeletal muscle. Oh, excuse me, let me go back there. Skeletal muscle, smooth muscle, and cardiac muscle. And the last category includes nervous tissue. Now, nervous tissue is usually how do I want to say this? Is usually depicted with the two main structures being your neurons. The neurons are the functional component, so it often looks like this. So a neuron could be really long, right? And that's why we don't have a lot of different like pictures of a full neuron with its axon and dendrites, because a neuron could sometimes be as long as 3 meters. There's a neuron that goes from my brain all the way to my spinal cord, and one that goes from my spinal cord all the way to my big toe. And they can be fairly big, but the best, I feel like some of the best depictions here is related to the neuron. So there's two types of cells, I should say generally. There's two types of cells located within nervous tissue. The first type of cell is the neuron. That is like the functional cell. The next type of cell is a helper cell. That is neuroglia, often referred to as neuroglia. That's where I'm going to put helper. But the major components of the neuron demonstrate the functions that include input, right? It receives information, it integrates the information, it then sends a response or output. And so a neuron at the level of the cell demonstrates this same function when we take a look at whether it's the dendrites. So I'll kind of color coordinate it for us. Pink. The dendrites here, these are dendrites. They provide input. The cell body or the yeah, soma. This contains the nucleus, and all the other major organelles are located within the cell body. That's where we get integration, processing. Then finally, output. That output occurs at the axon. This is referred to as the axon, the long single extension in which information travels away from the cell body and towards its target organ. That is the axon. And so that gives us the four different types of tissues in the body, right? A group of cells with the common function. They include nervous tissue, epithelial tissue, muscle tissue, and connective tissue. In the next sections, we'll be talking a little bit more specifically about each of these, starting with epithelial tissue and moving to connective tissue. Thanks for your time. Take care, and look forward to seeing your responses here in the future. Right. I'll record a cut a little bit more here uh, shortly after and start publishing it, but I did want to at least introduce that material there, get a new canvas, excuse me, get a new lecture up and start publishing it on Canvas. But it is about half hour after 6 here, and I'll start to wind it down. Uh, Stop recording that part. And then we will talk to you guys soon. Take care and best wishes.